How's it going, guys? With the offseason fully underway for the Green Bay Packers, we have 14 unrestricted free agents that we're going to have to make a decision on. And this isn't including the other 4 restricted free agents, but just the unrestricted free agents that we're going to have to make a decision if we would like to try and sign them back or just let them go. And here is my list of the 14 impending free agents from lowest priority to who should definitely make a priority to sign. So starting with our number 14th free agent, who is the lowest priority for us to sign, is cornerback Corey Ballentine. Corey Ballentine was mainly used in special teams, with rarely showing up on defense. He played a total of 8 games for the Packers. He did have 1 forced fumble and 5 combined total tackles, so he didn't really amount to anything for our team, and he was kind of just a depth and rotational piece and try to help out on special teams, but he didn't really make an impact at all, and he's pretty much a free agent that we expect to be released and not signed back. Next up, we have safety Dallin Levitt. He is mainly also another special teams player. He was actually brought over to Green Bay from Oakland as part of Rich Bisaccia's crew. He was mainly a special teams player, but he did play in all 17 games. He only had 13 total tackles for the Green Bay Packers. This is another player that's kind of a low priority, but he could come back if it's for a very low deal, especially for special teams, as he is one of Rich Bisaccia's guys. But out of all the players that are impending free agents and with our salary cap so tight, I can only see him being re-signed if he signed for the same deal that he signed for this year, which was $1.2 million. Next up, our 12th priority player, Dean Lowry. Dean Lowry has played his entire career with the Green Bay Packers, and he's currently going into his 8th year. He did start 12 games for us and played in 15 games before going out with that calf injury that landed him on IR, which kind of was a weird blessing in disguise because that means it allowed Devontae Wyatt to get more snaps. For the year, Dean Lowry had 43 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 5 QB hits, and a half sack. And despite how many games that he did play for us, as soon as he went out, it didn't feel like a loss. It was actually more of a gain. The interior line play definitely did better with Devontae Wyatt finally getting more snaps, and it could have taken Devontae Wyatt some more time, especially as a first-round pick, on the interior defense to acclimate himself to the NFL. But by the time Lowry went out, Devontae Wyatt seemed to be ready for the moment. So I feel like Dean Lowry won't be coming back, especially at a pricey deal. He could come back on a very cheap deal as a rotational piece, but he shouldn't really be taken as a priority. Definitely don't want him starting for the Packers, as it should go towards Devontae Wyatt, maybe even TJ Slayton. Next up at number 11, we have edge rusher Justin Hollins. Justin Hollins was cut by the Los Angeles Rams and put on waivers, and where the Packers put in a claim, and we were able to sign him. Hollins did play in 6 games for us as a Packer, and he had a total of 9 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, and 2.5 sacks, and he was mainly used as a rotational piece until Rashawn Gary went out. And then he started playing more snaps. Now, that also did lead to more snaps for Ignabare, but Hollins definitely had an uptick in snaps after Rashawn Gary went out. If he comes back next year, I could still see him being used as a rotational piece, especially kind of like how we did it towards the end of the year, as Rashawn Gary is still going to be recovering from the ACL injury. I don't know how quick he'll recover from it, but as we've seen, I'd rather take a slightly longer approach with Rashawn Gary so he gets that explosiveness back. So I see Justin Hollins, if it's for a team-friendly deal towards the veteran minimum, where we sign him and use him for some depth. Next up at number 10, we have defensive lineman Jarran Reed. He was signed in the offseason for the Green Bay Packers, and he started 14 games, but actually played in all 17 games for the Packers. His stat line for the season, he had 52 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 14 QB hits, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. He had some really good games against the Dolphins and the Patriots, and there were some games, like in those games, where he showed flashes, but he was very inconsistent throughout the season, and I don't think he should be relied on, especially as an everyday starter. He could be a good rotational piece if the Packers decide to keep him, but I feel like Jarran Reed will test free agency and someone will give him a contract more than what we're willing to offer. So if he leaves, it's not the biggest hurt in the world, but it would be nice to kind of have some more depth along the defensive line, when he did show some flashes, but like I said, he's very inconsistent. Number 9, Randall Cobb. This one kind of hurts, as I'm a huge fan of Randall Cobb. Green Bay Packer veteran, pretty much missed their third down, and a co-owner with Aaron Rodgers of the Chicago Bears. Randall Cobb has been someone that's been with us for almost his entire Packer career, minus 2 years, and he definitely started off with a bang in his rookie year when he returned to kickoff for a touchdown. Cobb was actually a bit more healthy this year than I expected him to be. He started in 3 games, but played in 13 of the 17 games and only went out on IR due to an ankle injury, which only sidelined him for 4 games. So considering his history, he actually played in more games than I expected. He was a constant security blanket for Aaron Rodgers, especially on third down. He's always a beast against the Chicago Bears, but Father Time is kind of catching up to him faster than a lot of other players on our team. He ended the season with 34 receptions, 417 yards, and a touchdown. And really the decision to bring back Randall Cobb is going to depend on A, is he going to retire? Because this feels like he's going to retire. And B, if Aaron Rodgers comes back. If Aaron Rodgers comes back and Cobb wants to play again, I feel like he will come back on a veteran minimum deal. But if he decides to retire, obviously he's gone. Or if Aaron Rodgers doesn't come back, he's going to definitely retire. So I feel like the status of Randall Cobb is going to depend on Aaron Rodgers. But in a priority stake, he's not the biggest priority. He is Aaron Rodgers' best friend, yes. But stat-wise and what he contributed to his team wasn't entirely much. And we really wasn't expecting much. Moving on to number 8, Robert Tonyan. Robert Tonyan's had his entire career here in Green Bay. He signed a 1-year deal last year on kind of like a prove-it deal. Robert Tonyan started in 3 games, but he did play in all 17 games. He came back a lot sooner from the ACL injury than a lot of us expected. For the year, he did have 53 receptions for 470 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he had actually very reliable hands with only 1 drop to his name. So when the ball was there and it hit his hands, he caught them. So he's got very reliable hands. But the problem with Robert Tonyan this year has been his lack of explosion. Like, it felt like when you watched him, he could not get separation to save his life. And that could be because of his ACL injury. He came back sooner than was expected. It's an ACL injury, so it might take him a little longer to get that explosion back. We kind of won't know till next year, and it's going to depend on how his market is. Are teams going to be able or want to spend a lot of money on Robert Tonyan that showed flashes 2 years ago when he had an all-star season? Or are they going to kind of look at that lack of explosion, the ACL injury? And that's going to determine what the Packers do. If he commands a high value market, the Packers aren't going to sign him. But if it's another team-friendly deal similar to like last year, I could see him coming back, and I feel like he should come back. Our tight end position is very, very rough. And granted, we do have a deep tight end class coming in, so we could draft a tight end, but this would help bridge the gap between if we signed a tight end in the draft and Robert Tonyan, who could come back to some type of form that he was 2 years ago before that injury. So this is kind of a hard one, especially with the tight end position. We always seem to do terrible in the draft when drafting tight ends. And I feel like if Robert Tonyan doesn't command a huge market, we should bring him back. Moving on to number 7, we have special teamer Eric Wilson. His actual position is linebacker. He ended up joining the Green Bay Packers in week 5 of the regular season, but he did play all 13 games with the Packers, and he mainly played it on special teams. On the stat sheet, he only had 4 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss, and a sack on defense, but his bread and butter was on special teams. He had 13 total tackles on special teams and was actually the highest graded special teams player in the entire NFL, with a 91.7 rating out of every single special teams player. Brian Gutekunst in his press conference said he would be willing to use some roster spots specifically for special team players, and I feel like Eric Wilson is definitely a player we should spend a specific roster spot on because he definitely helped with the improvement of our special teams. Now, number 6, we have safety Rudy Ford. Rudy Ford was signed in August and was mainly signed to be a special teams player, especially with his resume as a gunner. He ended up playing all 17 games for the Packers and started in 6, especially starting with the Dallas Cowboys, where he replaced struggling safety Darnell Savage, and it was essentially his coming out party where he picked off the Cowboys twice. After that Cowboys game, Rudy Ford took over for Darnell Savage, who was struggling very badly, especially in pass coverage. and was an upgrade during that time he was a starter. He was also a pretty good special teams player for us, and he should be brought back, and not only as a special teamer, but also to help with our safety position. That's kind of starting to become thin with the struggling of Darnell Savage, the purgatory of Adrian Amos, also on the expiring contract, and pretty much no one good behind those three. Number 5, kicker Mason Crosby. I kind of struggled with this. A lot of people don't think we should sign Mason Crosby because his leg has not been the same that it was in past years. He's getting older. He can't kick as far. Yes, I do understand that, but I still think he should be a high priority for the Packers. Mason Crosby has played his entire career with the Green Bay Packers, and he's currently going into his 17th year. He played in every game this season, and he made 25 out of 29 field goals this season after an abysmal 2021 season where our entire special teams unit was terrible. And he converted 37 of 39 extra point attempts. Now, he obviously struggles from kicking 50 yards and further on field goals, only making one field goal of 56 yards. But despite that leg power, his accuracy is still amazing for us. Like, it showed up time and time again. He is very accurate. And I feel like it's hard to find accurate kickers in this league, especially consistently accurate kickers. Yeah, they could have a leg like Greg Zuerlein did, but if the accuracy is not there, what's the point? It's like back in the day with the quarterback Jay Cutler, who had all the arm strength, but God, was his accuracy terrible. So I feel like Mason Crosby, based off his accuracy and how consistent he is, he should be signed. And then what will have to come into play, though, if we decide to go that route, is the kickoffs. Because he shouldn't do kickoffs anymore, and maybe they try to have Pat O'Donnell do kickoffs. I'm not entirely sure on that one. It'll depend on conversations with Pat O'Donnell if they decide to go Mason Crosby or just go younger and draft a kicker, since we have 4 7th-round picks. But with his consistency, Mason Crosby should be a priority to sign because the kicking game, we could lose games if we don't have an accurate kicker. But this could all be for me because Mason Crosby could decide he wants to retire, or what his asking price is going to be way more than the Packers decide. But depending on the asking price, if we don't look at that, he should be a priority. Number 4, we have tight end Mercedes Lewis. And that might be a shock to a lot of you guys. Mercedes Lewis, 39 years old. He's old. But he should be a priority for us. Last year, he started all 17 games for us. He had 6 receptions for 66 yards and 2 tight ends. But that's not his bread and butter. His bread and butter is blocking, not just in the run game, but also the pass. He is an exceptionally good and consistent blocker for us. And he's very integral to Matt LaFleur's offense. And it's why I feel like even despite the age of being 39 years old, if he decides to not retire, he should come back. He's great on the blocking. Hopefully he'd be able to continue that, of course, because we can't just look at this year. But based off this year, we should still keep him. And he's a huge veteran presence for us. He's a great locker room guy. And sometimes you just need those veteran leaderships and locker guys. And he's definitely one of those. So he should be a high priority for us this time if he wants to come back and play another season in the NFL. Moving on to number 3, I kind of went back and forth on this, but I settled with Allen Lazard. We all know who Allen Lazard is. It's his 5th year in Green Bay. He signed his RFA tender this year on a 1-year deal and pretty much was expected to be the number 1 receiver. Did he live up to those expectations? No. And I feel like most of us were wondering, how can we expect him to be the number 1 receiver? He shouldn't be the number 1 receiver, and that's fine. But he's still a very good piece to this offense. He is a great run blocker. He's a great blocker, actually, period. And LaFleur loves his blocking receivers. But as the number 1 receiver, he did lead the team with 60 receptions, 788 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And if you saw my earlier video or watched one of his press conferences, he pretty much talked like he was done being a Green Bay Packer. And he expects that the Packers aren't going to be able to match whatever he's going to command outside of Green Bay in the receiving, which is currently booming, which thanks to Christian Kirk. He's going to get paid. Now, the question is how much? I feel like there is going to be a market for Allen Lazard. He won't get paid or shouldn't be paid as a number 1 receiver, but he's definitely going to get paid more than what we're probably willing to pay him. I would love for Alan Lazard to come back. I think he's very necessary for this offense. His run blocking is amazing. He has very reliable hands. Yes, in the last game against the Lions, he dropped a couple, but overall, he has pretty reliable hands and good chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. And I feel like he'd actually be a good number 3 receiver for us, especially with the emergence of Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs coming in. Those two hopefully making the next step. I feel like he could be a very good number 3 receiver for us. But unfortunately, priority for him doesn't mean we're going to sign him, and we're probably going to lose him. Now moving on to the second highest priority player that we should re-sign, which will be a shocker, is safety Adrian Amos. And just hear me out. He has a great first name, and you're lucky I didn't put him at number 1 because of that first name. But Adrian Amos was signed to the Green Bay Packers 4 years ago to replace Clinton Dix, and he was an instant upgrade. Suck it, Bears, and you thought was better. But Adrian Amos played the entire contract. He didn't miss a single play, and he actually had the second most snaps played in Green Bay over the past 4 years, next to Aaron Rodgers. Adrian Amos became a star in his first year and just pretty much helped solidify the back end with a rising Darnell Savage, which I still feel like Joe Barry did something. Moving past that, this year Adrian Amos had 102 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2 QB hits, 1 sack, 5 pass deflections, and 1 interception. And he only actually had 4 missed tackles the entire season on a team that felt like we were missing a lot of tackles. I'm pretty sure Devondre Campbell, I didn't look this up, but I'm pretty sure I saw a tweet that he had 11 missed tackles this year, which is a huge increase from last year. Adrian Amos was at least one of our surest tackles on defense. The problem with Adrian Amos this year was, yes, he didn't play as good as he did in previous years. He definitely lost a step in his explosion, and he was just getting beat in pass coverage. In pass coverage, QBs had a 70% completion percentage and a quarterback rating of a 107.7 when thrown at Adrian Amos. So obviously, pass coverage was a problem. Pass coverage was a problem in general for us, it felt like, which was supposed to be our strength. And despite that, he did seem to come on late in the season as the defense as a whole started to pick up their stuff. But we can't disregard that most of the season, he looked kind of like a liability. And because of that, with his expiring contract and him potentially costing a lot, most people think he's gone. And I don't think that should be the case. And that might be a shock considering his deteriorating play, his big contract that he was being paid. But if you look at the free agent market, especially for veteran safeties, it is not friendly to players. Like, they do not command a large chunk of money. So I feel like he should actually be a high priority, especially with our safety position being a position of need currently, re-signed to this team. And maybe we'll draft a free safety, or Rudy Ford will take over free safety, or both. And Adrian Amos can move over to strong safety and to better suit his current play style, especially with a diminishing speed. And then Darnell Savage could kind of get knocked down to the in-the-box safety because his pass coverage is even worse than Adrian Amos's. And so with all of that, I feel like he should be signed. Like, we should make it a priority to sign him. He was a great veteran leadership on our team, a great veteran presence, and he could help teach the next free safety because he was a good free safety, and he just had some regression in his speed. And now, the most important player that we should take the most priority, takes the biggest priority for us to sign, is cornerback Keyshawn Nixon. Now, Keyshawn Nixon was signed in the offseason as one of Rich Bisaccia's guys. He loves playing for Rich Bisaccia and played for Rich over in Oakland last year and followed him over to Green Bay this year. Nixon didn't really account too much during the preseason or the regular season, as mainly Amari Rodgers, for some reason, held on to the kick returning jobs for so long. And it was a fear every time they kicked to him. Punt returns, kick returns, I didn't trust the man catching the ball. But finally, I don't know what clicked. They released Amari Rodgers and Keyshawn Nixon took over the duties for kick return. And my God, was it a difference. Despite not playing the entire year as a kick returner, Keyshawn Nixon had 35 kick returns, led the league with 1,009 return yards and 1 touchdown, with that being a 105-yard touchdown. It definitely made a weakness a strength for us because before, like I said, Amari Rodgers, I was afraid if he was just going to even catch the ball, fumble, turnover, it was stressful. And then comes in Keyshawn Nixon, and I'm giddy. I'm wondering if this man's going to return it for a touchdown every time. He was very explosive. He was a difference maker. Even Aaron Rodgers came out and be like, I'm telling him to take it out for once. And with all that, special teams started to become a fear against teams. They started kicking away from him. So he was definitely a difference maker, and I don't remember the last time we had a true difference maker like that on special teams. And to add on that, he wasn't just a special teams player. He did fill in at slot corner for us on defense, and he was actually a lot better than we expected. So not only is he just a special teams player, he's also a pretty decent slot corner for us. Hence why I didn't term him a special teams player, but a cornerback. But that's my ranking of how we should prioritize and who we should sign and not sign. Not saying that we should go out and sign the top 10 players or top 5 players that I prioritize, but in ranks of priority, I think those are who we should focus a lot of time on, and then the other players who we shouldn't really bother with. But let me know what you think down in the comments. If you liked the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, go Pack Go.